My only daughter thought I didn't see her putting something in my drink, so I switched glasses. There it was. The gentle nudge toward helplessness she'd been perfecting for months. I wasn't cooking too much, I was losing my grip on reality. I wasn't managing my finances, I was confused about numbers. I wasn't being cautious about my health, I was paranoid. Have you ever had a family member you couldn't trust with your life? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family, enjoy the story. I never imagined the moment would come when my own daughter would slip something into my glass at the dinner table, her hands steady, her eyes carefully avoiding mine. We were in her kitchen in Columbus, Ohio, the smell of roasted chicken filling the air, when I caught that tiny flick of her wrist, the powder dissolving almost instantly in my iced tea. She thought I wasn't paying attention. She thought I was too old, too slow, too trusting. But I had been watching closely for months, ever since the whispers about the new power of attorney documents, ever since I felt pushed to the edges of my own life. So, I calmly switched our glasses when she stepped out to answer her phone. That single act, small and quiet, would change everything. What happened next wasn't chaos, it was silence, the kind of silence that feels like the air itself is holding its breath. My daughter took a sip of the drink meant for me, her face paling within minutes, her forced laughter turning into discomfort. I drove her to the ER myself, telling the doctors she must have mixed up her medication. But behind the hospital curtains, while she slept off her own scheme, I pulled out the folder I'd been keeping hidden in my car trunk, drafts of altered wills, backdated letters, and emails I'd traced with the help of a retired paralegal in Dayton. She wasn't just after my health, she was after my entire legacy. The glass switching was only the beginning of my quiet justice. If you've ever wondered how far someone would go to protect themselves from family betrayal, this story will shake you to your core. Have you ever had a family member you couldn't trust with your life? Follow along as we uncover a deception that's been months in the making. The powder hit my iced tea like snow on warm ground, gone in seconds. She thought I was looking at my plate. I was watching her wrist. Caroline had always been careful with her hands. Even as a child, she'd fold napkins into perfect squares, arrange her toys in straight lines. Tonight, those same steady fingers moved with surgical precision as she reached into her jacket pocket. The kitchen light caught the tiny plastic baggie for just a moment before it disappeared back into her coat. "Mom, you're not eating much," she said, settling back into her chair across from me. The roasted chicken sat between us, golden and fragrant, but I couldn't smell food anymore. Only the metallic taste of fear in my mouth. I picked up my fork, let it hover over the mashed potatoes. "Just thinking about your father. He loved when I made this recipe." Caroline's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Dad's been gone 3 years, Mom. Maybe it's time to stop cooking for an army." There it was. The gentle nudge toward helplessness she'd been perfecting for months. I wasn't cooking too much, I was losing my grip on reality. I wasn't managing my finances, I was confused about numbers. I wasn't being cautious about my health, I was paranoid. One wrong sip changes everything forever. Subscribe so you catch the warning signs before it's too late. My glass sat 6 inches from my right hand, the ice cubes slowly melting, diluting whatever she dissolved into the sweet tea. I'd watched her make it herself, insisting I just relax while she handled everything. Caroline had poured from the same pitcher, but only one glass got her special attention. "I'll be right back," she said, pulling her buzzing phone from her purse. "Work call. You know how it is." She stepped onto the back porch, her voice immediately dropping to a whisper. Through the kitchen window, I could see her pacing, one hand gesturing as she spoke. This was my moment. I stood slowly, my knees protesting after an hour of sitting. The kitchen felt enormous as I crossed the 3 feet between our chairs. My hands shook, not from age, but from anger, as I switched our glasses. The ice clinked softly, the only sound in the suddenly quiet house. Caroline's voice drifted through the screen door. "Should be effective within 30 minutes, yes, I have the papers ready." I was back in my seat when she returned, sliding her phone into her purse with practiced ease. Sorry about that. Insurance company. She lifted her glass, the one that had been mine, and took a long drink. Now, where were we? I watched her face, counted the seconds. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. At 15 Mississippi, her eyebrows drew together slightly. At 30 Mississippi, she set the glass down and pressed her fingers to her temple. Feeling all right, dear? I asked, my voice steady as stone. She took another sip, smaller this time. Just tired. Long drive from Indiana. 45 Mississippi. Her hand went to her stomach. 50 Mississippi. She pushed back from the table. Mom, I think I need some air. Would you have switched the glasses, or confronted her directly? Comment below. I want to know what you would have done in my shoes. By 60 Mississippi, Caroline was gripping the edge of the table, her knuckles white against the oak finish. The powder she'd meant for me was doing its work, just not on its intended target. She took the first sip of what was meant for me. Her face went white in 30 seconds. I drove her to the ER myself, my hand steady on the wheel while hers shook in her lap. I don't understand what's happening, Caroline whispered, her head pressed against the passenger window. The streetlights threw shadows across her pale face as we passed under them, one after another, like a countdown to consequences. Sometimes our bodies surprise us, I said, keeping my voice gentle, concerned. The perfect worried mother. Remember when you were 8 and ate those wild berries behind the Hendersons' house? Same kind of stomach trouble. She groaned softly, curling further into herself. This is different, Mom. This feels like. She paused, maybe thinking better of finishing that thought. Like poison, I imagined she wanted to say. Like the powder she'd slipped into my drink. The hospital parking lot was nearly empty at 9:30 on a Tuesday night. I pulled into a space close to the emergency entrance, turned off the engine, and looked at my daughter. Really looked at her. When had her face become so hard? When had her eyes learned to calculate instead of dream? Can you walk? I asked. Caroline nodded, though her legs wobbled when she stood. I took her arm, supporting her weight as we moved toward the automatic doors. To anyone watching, I was the devoted mother helping her sick daughter. They couldn't see the folder locked in my trunk, couldn't hear the phone calls I'd been recording, couldn't know that every step I took was planned. The triage nurse was young, efficient. What brings you in tonight? My daughter's having stomach problems, I explained, settling Caroline into a chair. Nausea, cramping. She thinks she might have mixed up her medications this morning. Caroline's head snapped up, confusion flickering across her features. But she didn't correct me. Couldn't, really, without admitting why she'd been carrying that little plastic baggie in her jacket pocket. What medications? The nurse asked, fingers poised over her keyboard. I looked at Caroline, waiting. Let her explain what she'd been carrying, what she'd planned to slip into my system. Let her tell this nurse about the powder that was now attacking her own stomach lining. I take anxiety medication, Caroline managed. Sometimes I double up when I'm stressed. The nurse nodded, typed. Another victim of modern life's pressures, her expression seemed to say. We'll get you back to a room shortly. I squeezed Caroline's shoulder, the gesture any mother would make. But my fingers found the spot where her jacket pocket sat, felt the empty space where evidence used to be. How would you handle someone who just tried to poison you? Would you stay calm like I did, or would you have called the police immediately? While she slept in that hospital bed, I walked back to my car. The trunk held everything I needed. My husband built that cedar chest in 1987. Caroline had no idea it was my evidence vault. The chest sat at the foot of our old bed, same place it had lived for 38 years. Most people kept wedding photos in cedar chests, maybe some baby clothes or handmade quilts. I kept carbon copies. Every form I'd ever signed, every bank statement, every legal document that had crossed my kitchen table. The habit started when Tom was alive, He'd always said you never know when you might need proof of something. After he died, it became my insurance policy. I lifted the heavy lid, breathing in the familiar scent of cedar and old paper. The files were organized by year, each section marked with Tom's careful handwriting on manila tabs. 2024 was getting thick. 3 months ago, I'd started noticing things. Small things, the kind that make you question your own memory until you write them down. Caroline's visits became more frequent but shorter, always focused on my paperwork. She'd volunteer to help organize my bills, insist on taking mail to the post office, offer to streamline my banking. I pulled out the blue folder marked Social Security, 2024, and spread the contents across my bedspread. There it was, in black and white, the routing change form I'd supposedly signed in March. My signature looked right. Caroline had always been good at copying my handwriting, even as a teenager forging excuse notes for school. But the date was wrong. March 15th fell on a Friday this year. I had been in the hospital having my knee surgery that day, knocked out on anesthesia while some surgeon rebuilt my joint. The bank statements told the story Caroline thought I'd never piece together. My Social Security payments, $1,847 every month, had been deposited into my regular checking account for 67 years. Then suddenly, in March, they started flowing to a new joint account I'd supposedly opened at a different bank entirely. I reached deeper into the chest, pulling out the red folder. Visits and Conversations, 2024. Inside, a small notebook where I'd started tracking Caroline's behavior after Tom's funeral. Dates, times, what she'd asked about, what papers she'd looked at. The entries started innocent enough. February 3rd, Caroline asked about my will. Says she's worried I don't have everything sorted out for when I'm gone. February 17th, she wanted to know about life insurance policies. How much, who's the beneficiary? Said she's just making sure I'm protected. March 8th, found her in my bedroom looking through my dresser drawers. She said she was organizing, but couldn't explain why my jewelry box was moved. The pattern was clear when you laid it out like evidence instead of scattered memories. Caroline wasn't worried about my future, she was planning for it. Planning for a future where I couldn't speak for myself. Financial predators count on your silence and shame. Subscribe to learn how they operate before they target someone you love. But the real discovery was in the manila envelope taped to the inside lid of the cedar chest. Photocopies of the power of attorney documents Caroline had been carrying tonight. I'd found them in her purse 2 weeks ago during Sunday dinner, while she was outside taking another work call. The papers were already filled out, already notarized, missing only my signature. The effective date was left blank, ready to be filled in whenever Caroline deemed me incompetent. The notary signatures belonged to people I'd never met. I'd called both numbers listed. One was disconnected. The other belonged to a woman who insisted she'd never notarized any documents for anyone named Caroline. I gathered the papers carefully, returned them to their files. The cedar chest had been my husband's gift to preserve our memories. Now it was my weapon to preserve my life. 3 months of redirected checks. $50,000. All flowing to an account I never signed for. What's the first sign someone's stealing from an elderly relative? Have you seen these red flags in your own family? Share your experience below. Margaret had been retired from the Dayton courthouse for 5 years, but her instincts were sharper than my kitchen knives. I'd found her number in the yellow pages, back when people still used those. Retired legal professional, document review and consultation, the small ad read. When I called, she suggested we meet at the Cracker Barrel off Route 35, somewhere public but quiet enough to spread papers across the table. She was smaller than I'd expected, maybe 70 herself, with silver hair pulled into a neat bun and reading glasses hanging from a beaded chain. But when she opened her leather portfolio and pulled out a magnifying glass, I knew I'd found the right person. Start from the beginning, Margaret said, stirring cream into her coffee. Tell me what made you suspicious. I laid out the bank statements first, the Social Security redirect forms, the power of attorney papers. Margaret's eyebrows climbed higher with each document. This signature, she said, pointing to my supposedly signed name on the routing change form. See how the E in your first name loops differently? And the pressure on the pen, it's too heavy in some places, too light in others. Whoever copied this was trying too hard to make it perfect. She pulled out a comparison sheet, one of my real signatures from a Christmas card I'd brought along. Under the magnifying glass, the differences were obvious. The forged signature had tiny hesitations, places where the pen had paused as someone tried to remember how my letters connected. What about the dates? I asked. Margaret checked her phone calendar, cross-referencing with the hospital discharge papers I'd brought. March 15th, you were under general anesthesia. March 16th, you were in recovery, probably barely conscious. March 17th was a Sunday. Banks don't process new account paperwork on Sundays. She leaned back in her chair, her expression grim. This isn't a desperate daughter making bad choices. This is systematic fraud. Professional-level document manipulation. Ever had someone forge your signature? Most people don't realize how easy it is to detect when you know what to look for. The power of attorney documents are worse, Margaret continued, flipping through the notarized pages. These notary stamps? I know both of these people. One moved to Florida in 2023. The other died last Christmas. My coffee went cold in my hands. So the notarizations are completely fake. Which makes these documents worthless in court, but very dangerous in the wrong hands. Someone shows up at your bank with power of attorney papers. Most tellers don't have the training to spot fraud. They just process the request. Margaret pulled out a yellow legal pad and started making notes. We need to move fast. First, you'll file identity theft reports with the police and your bank. Second, we'll request a forensic analysis of all these signatures. Third, we'll put a freeze on any new account activity. She looked up at me, her pale blue eyes serious. But I have to ask, do you feel safe? If your daughter discovers you're investigating her. She tried to drug me tonight, I said quietly. I think we're past worried about her feelings. Margaret's finger traced the signature line. This isn't your handwriting. This isn't even close. How did you prove someone was stealing your identity? Share your story below. The bank manager's face changed when I showed him the signature comparison. From polite to protective in 10 seconds. Mrs. Johnson, I'm going to be very direct with you, David Martinez said, closing my file folder with a snap. What you're showing me is textbook elder financial abuse. We see it more often than we'd like to admit. His office was small but organized, family photos on the desk next to stacks of loan applications. He'd been managing the downtown branch for 12 years, he told me, long enough to spot trouble when it walked through his doors. The routing changes happened on 3 separate occasions, he continued, pulling up my account history on his computer screen. March 17th, April 2nd, and April 28th. Each time, someone claiming to be you called first to verify the change was coming. I leaned forward in my chair. Someone called pretending to be me? The voice on our recorded line sounds like an older woman. Knew your social security number, your mother's maiden name, even your first pet's name. He paused, studying my face. Information only family would have. My stomach dropped. Caroline had grown up hearing those security question answers. She'd named our first dog, helped me set up my first email account, watched me fill out countless forms over the years. Banks won't tell you about signature fraud until it's too late. Subscribe to stay protected and know the warning signs. David pulled out a thick folder from his desk drawer. I'm starting an internal investigation immediately. These signature cards will go to our fraud department for analysis. We'll also need to flag your social security number in our system. No changes can be made without you appearing in person with 2 forms of ID. What about the money that was stolen? $53,412, he said, reading from his screen. The good news is that federal law protects victims of elder financial abuse. We can reverse those transfers, but it requires police involvement. He handed me a business card. Detective Williams handles financial crimes for the Columbus Police Department. I'm going to call her as soon as you leave. With your permission, of course. I tucked the card into my purse, next to Margaret's contact information. My support team was growing. There's something else, David said, lowering his voice. The account where your money was transferred? It's been very active. Large cash withdrawals, money orders, even some online gambling transactions. Whoever's using it isn't being careful about covering their tracks. Can you see who's making the withdrawals? David clicked through several screens, then turned his monitor toward me. ATM photos from the past month. Take a look. The images were grainy but clear enough. Caroline at the drive-through ATM on Spring Street. Caroline inside the Kroger, buying money orders at customer service. Caroline at the casino 20 miles outside Columbus, feeding bills into slot machines. My daughter, spending my retirement money like it was her personal lottery winnings. She's not even trying to hide it, I whispered. Most family members don't, David said. They assume the victim won't fight back, won't involve authorities. They count on shame and family loyalty to keep their crimes quiet. Should I have called the police immediately? What would you do if this was your family member? 7 transactions. 7 forged signatures. All within Caroline's visit dates from Indiana. The power of attorney documents were hidden in her purse. I found them while she recovered from her own medicine. Caroline had been moved to a private room by midnight, the stomach pumping and 4 fluids doing their work. She slept deeply, probably the most peaceful sleep she'd had in months. No scheming, no planning, no calculating how to steal from her own mother. Her purse sat on the bedside table, black leather worn smooth at the handles. I'd bought it for her last Christmas, back when I still thought her frequent visits meant she cared about spending time with me. Now I understood they were business trips. The hospital hallway was quiet except for the soft beeping of monitors and the distant conversation of night nurses. I unzipped Caroline's purse slowly, quietly, my fingers finding the inner pocket where she always kept important papers. The documents were folded in thirds, crisp and official-looking. Durable power of attorney for financial affairs, printed across the top in bold letters. My name listed as the principal, Caroline's as the agent. The language was complex, full of legal phrases I didn't fully understand, but the meaning was clear enough. Total control over my bank accounts, investment decisions, property sales, even medical choices. I photographed every page with my phone, the camera flash reflecting off the hospital room's white walls. The notary sections were already filled out, signatures I'd never seen before, official seals that looked authentic but felt wrong. How many elderly people sign away their rights without realizing what they're agreeing to? The answer might shock you. But it was the effective date that made my hands shake. April 30th, tomorrow. Caroline had planned this down to the day. The dinner, the powder in my drink, the hospital visit where I'd be declared, confused and disoriented, by morning. By the time the sun set tomorrow, she would legally control every aspect of my life. I kept reading, my phone camera capturing page after page of Caroline's carefully laid plans. There were backup plans, contingencies, alternate scenarios. If the power of attorney wasn't enough, she had guardianship paperwork ready to file. If I resisted medical treatment, she had documents claiming I was a danger to myself. The most chilling discovery was a handwritten note paper clipped to the back pages, Caroline's familiar scrawl outlining her timeline. Tuesday evening, dinner, medication event Wednesday morning, hospital evaluation, confusion documented. Wednesday afternoon, POA filed, bank notification sent Thursday, property assessment, real estate consultation Friday, nursing home tour, emergency placement. 5 days. She'd planned to erase my independence in 5 days. I photographed the handwritten timeline, then carefully refolded the documents and returned them to her purse. Caroline stirred slightly but didn't wake. The sedatives would keep her quiet for several more hours. Back in the hallway, I called Margaret from a pay phone near the vending machines. "It's worse than we thought," I said when she answered, her voice thick with sleep. "How much worse?" She had me committed to a nursing home by Friday. "The paperwork's already filled out." Margaret was quiet for a long moment. "Bring me everything tomorrow. We're filing an emergency restraining order." I looked back toward Caroline's room, where my daughter slept off the consequences of her own poison. What if she wakes up and realizes I know? Then we move faster than she does. Criminal charges or protective orders first, what would you prioritize? Tell me in the comments. Effective date, the day after dinner. She planned to have me declared incompetent by morning. Attorney Williams had seen fraud before, but never paired with attempted poisoning. His pen stopped moving. Margaret had recommended him, 30 years handling elder abuse cases, she said, with a track record of actually winning them. His office was in a converted house downtown, law books lining every wall, the kind of place that felt serious and safe at the same time. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," Thomas Williams said, looking up from his yellow legal pad. "Your daughter tried to drug you, had power of attorney papers ready to file the next morning, and has been stealing your Social Security payments for 3 months?" "That's right." I'd laid out all the evidence on his conference table: bank statements, forged signatures, photographs of the POA documents, even screenshots of Caroline at the ATM machines. "And you switched the drinks, so she ended up poisoning herself instead?" "I did." Attorney Williams leaned back in his leather chair, shaking his head slowly. "In 40 years of practice, I've never seen anything quite like this. The audacity is remarkable." He picked up one of the POA documents, studying the notary seals with a magnifying glass. "These are excellent forgeries. Professional quality. Your daughter either paid someone very skilled, or she has talents I wouldn't want to advertise. What are my options?" "Several, and we need to pursue all of them immediately." He pulled out a fresh legal pad and started writing. "First, we file for an emergency protective order. This prevents Caroline from coming within 500 feet of you or your property. Second, we report the financial fraud to both local police and the FBI. Elder financial abuse across state lines is a federal crime. Elder abuse cases get buried in paperwork every day. Subscribe so yours never gets ignored by the system." "What about the attempted poisoning?" "That's attempted assault with a dangerous substance, possibly attempted murder depending on what she put in your drink. The hospital should have blood work from her emergency room visit. Whatever she gave herself will show up in those tests." Attorney Williams stood up, walking to his window that overlooked the courthouse across the street. "The challenge with family crimes is that juries sometimes expect victims to work it out privately. They don't understand that the most dangerous predators are often the ones who know exactly how to manipulate your trust." "I trusted her completely," I said quietly. "Right up until I didn't." That's what she counted on. Family loyalty, the assumption that blood relatives wouldn't really hurt you, the shame of admitting your own child is stealing from you. He turned back to face me. "But you're not the one who should feel ashamed here." He sat back down, his expression shifting from sympathetic to determined. "Here's what we're going to do. I'm filing an emergency motion this afternoon for asset protection. All your accounts will be frozen pending investigation. No one, including you, can touch that money until we sort this out. What if I need cash for groceries, utilities? The court will establish a supervised account for your daily expenses. It's inconvenient, but it protects you from further theft." He picked up his phone. "I'm also calling Adult Protective Services. They need to document this case properly. Would you trust the system to protect you, or handle this privately? What's your gut reaction?" He reached for his phone. "We're calling Adult Protective Services. Today." The APS investigator had kind eyes and a steel backbone. Caroline was about to meet both. Jessica Chin arrived at my house the next morning carrying a briefcase and a digital recorder. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with black hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and the kind of steady gaze that missed nothing. I've been investigating elder abuse for 8 years, she said, settling into my kitchen chair, the same chair where Caroline had sat 2 nights ago, plotting my downfall. Your case has some unique elements. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder already labeled with my name and case number. Most financial abuse happens slowly, over months or years. Small amounts, hard to track. What your daughter attempted was aggressive, fast-moving, and remarkably well documented. I poured coffee for both of us, my hands steadier than they'd been in weeks. Having official help felt like breathing again. The attempted poisoning changes everything, Jessica continued. Financial fraud is serious, but adding physical harm elevates this to a potential felony case. Can you walk me through exactly what happened that night? I told her everything. The powder in the drink, the glass switch, Caroline's phone call about having papers ready, the hospital visit, the discovery of the POA documents. Jessica took notes, occasionally asking for clarification, her pen never stopping. You photographed the power of attorney papers while she was unconscious? I had to. They were going to disappear the moment she woke up. Smart thinking. Those photos may be the strongest evidence we have. She flipped through printouts of the images I'd sent to Attorney Williams. The handwritten timeline is particularly damning. Shows premeditation, planning, intent to commit multiple crimes. Manipulation tactics work until someone calls them out publicly. Subscribe to recognize the patterns before they trap you. Jessica pulled out a digital device that looked like a small tape recorder. I need to record your formal statement for our case file. This will be used in court proceedings, so I want you to be as detailed as possible. For the next hour, I spoke into that recorder, telling my story from the beginning. Caroline's increased visits after Tom's funeral, the subtle questions about my finances, the missing mail, the forged bank documents. Jessica occasionally stopped me to ask follow-up questions, but mostly she just listened. One more thing, she said when we finished. I need you to understand that once we file formal charges, this becomes a criminal matter. There's no taking it back, no working it out as a family. Caroline will be arrested. I thought about my daughter sleeping peacefully in that hospital bed while I discovered her plans to steal my life. She made her choice when she put that powder in my drink. Jessica closed her folder, case number 2024 EA 1847 printed on the tab. I'll have preliminary charges filed by tomorrow morning. Would you press criminal charges against your own child? The decision that changed everything. Case number assigned. Investigation official. Caroline's calls were about to get very interesting. Caroline walked into my living room expecting an apology. She got a subpoena instead. She'd been released from the hospital that morning, calling me from the parking lot with a voice full of manufactured concern. Mom, I'm so sorry about dinner the other night. I think my anxiety medication interacted badly with something. Can I come over? We need to talk. I'd agreed, of course. But I'd also made a few calls first. Jessica Chen was parked across the street in an unmarked car. Attorney Williams was on speed dial. Margaret sat in my kitchen, pretending to help with afternoon tea but really there as a witness to whatever Caroline had planned. When Caroline knocked, I opened the door myself. She looked pale still, dark circles under her eyes, but her purse was clutched tight against her side. The same purse that had held my stolen future 2 nights ago. Hi, Mom. She stepped inside, glancing around the living room like she was seeing it for the first time. Maybe she was, seeing it as something she'd never get to sell, never get to liquidate, never get to claim. Sit down, dear, I said, settling into Tom's old recliner. We do need to talk. Caroline perched on the edge of the couch, still holding her purse. I wanted to explain about Tuesday night. The medication mix-up. I know it scared you, and I'm so sorry. What medication was it? I asked, keeping my voice gentle, curious. She blinked, caught off guard. My anxiety pills. I told you. Which ones? What's the name? Mom, why does that matter? The important thing is lorazepam? Xanax? Klonopin? I leaned forward slightly. I'm just wondering what could cause stomach cramping, nausea, and disorientation in such a small dose. Caroline's grip on her purse tightened. I don't remember the exact name. Manipulation tactics work until someone calls them out directly. Subscribe to recognize the patterns before they're used on you. I reached behind my chair and pulled out the manila folder I'd prepared. Maybe this will help refresh your memory. I spread the contents across my coffee table methodically, like laying out cards for solitaire. Bank statements showing the redirected Social Security payments. Signature comparison sheets. Photographs of Caroline at ATM machines. Screenshots of the forged power of attorney documents. What is all this? Caroline asked, but her voice had changed. The concerned daughter act was cracking. Evidence, I said simply. Of systematic financial fraud, identity theft, and attempted poisoning. Caroline stood up quickly, her purse falling to the floor. Papers scattered across my carpet, more POA documents, blank checks with my name pre-printed, even a business card for a nursing home in Westerville. Mom, you're confused. You're mixing up. I'm mixing up nothing. I picked up the nursing home brochure. Sunset Manor. Did you already put down a deposit, or were you waiting until you had me declared incompetent? The mask finally fell away completely. Caroline's face hardened, her voice dropping to a tone I'd never heard before. You have no idea how expensive your medical care is going to be. How much money you're going to need for the next 20 years. I was trying to protect. You were trying to steal $53,000 and lock me away so I couldn't stop you. That money was going to be mine eventually anyway. The words hung in the air between us like a confession. Margaret appeared in the kitchen doorway, her phone already recording. Eventually, I repeated. But not soon enough for your gambling debts, your credit cards, your mess of a life in Indiana. Caroline bent down to gather her scattered papers, her hands shaking. You can't prove any of this. It's your word against mine. I smiled, the first genuine smile I'd felt in months. Actually, it's your word against the FBI, Adult Protective Services, the Columbus Police Department, and about 12 different security cameras. The doorbell rang. Through the window, I could see Jessica Chin walking up my front steps, official badge visible on her belt. Caroline Marie Patterson, I said, using her full name like I had when she was a child caught stealing cookies. You are about to learn that some mistakes follow you forever. Is family loyalty worth financial abuse? Where do you draw the line? Tell me in the comments. Her final words as she left, you'll regret this, mother. Family forgives. Courts don't. The anonymous tip to Adult Services claimed I was mentally declining. Caroline's fingerprints were all over it. 3 days after her arrest, while Caroline sat in county lockup waiting for her bail hearing, someone called the Elder Abuse Hotline. A concerned voice, female, older, claiming to be a family friend, reported that I was showing signs of dementia. Confusion about finances, paranoid thoughts about family members, aggressive behavior toward caregivers. Jessica Chin called me at 7 in the morning, her voice tight with frustration. We have to take all reports seriously, even obvious retaliation. I need to do a wellness check today. How did Caroline make the call from jail? She didn't. Someone else made it for her. Probably coached on exactly what to say. Jessica paused. The caller knew details about your case that haven't been made public. This wasn't a random tip. By 10 o'clock, Jessica was back at my kitchen table, this time accompanied by Dr. Sarah Martinez, a geriatric specialist who'd been brought in to evaluate my mental state. Mrs. Johnson, Dr. Martinez said, settling into the chair Caroline had occupied just days before, I'm here to assess your cognitive function and general wellness. Think of this as a routine checkup. How do you prove you're mentally sharp when someone's spreading lies about your competence? The stakes couldn't be higher. For the next 2 hours, I answered questions, solved puzzles, recalled dates and names, performed simple math calculations. Martinez had me draw clock faces, repeat word sequences, explain the current political situation. I felt like a student taking the most important test of my life. "Tell me about your financial management," Dr. Martinez said, making notes on her clipboard. "Do you handle your own banking, pay bills, make investment decisions?" I pulled out my checkbook register, balanced to the penny. My bill-paying system, organized by due dates. My investment portfolio printouts, with handwritten notes tracking performance over the past 5 years. "I've been managing money since I was 16, I said. 47 years of marriage, raised 2 children, put them both through college, paid off a mortgage, and saved enough for retirement. What part of that suggests mental decline?" Dr. Martinez smiled, the first crack in her professional demeanor. "The anonymous caller claimed you were paranoid about family members stealing from you." "Paranoid would mean the threat wasn't real," I replied, sliding the folder of evidence across the table. "When someone actually steals $50,000 and tries to poison you, concern seems like the appropriate response." Jessica had been quiet during most of the evaluation, but now she leaned forward. "Doctor, what's your assessment?" "Mrs. Johnson shows no signs of cognitive impairment, dementia, or any condition that would affect her ability to make independent decisions." Dr. Martinez closed her folder firmly. In fact, her response to financial fraud has been remarkably organized and intelligent. Most victims don't document evidence this thoroughly. So the anonymous tip was complete fabrication. Someone coached the caller on terminology that would trigger a mandatory investigation. Dr. Martinez looked directly at me. "Someone who hoped we'd find you incompetent and confirm their false narrative. If this sounds familiar to your family situation, don't wait. Subscribe, the next warning could save someone's independence." After they left, I sat in my quiet kitchen, surrounded by the paperwork that had just proved my competence. Caroline's final desperate move had backfired spectacularly. Instead of casting doubt on my mental state, the evaluation had created an official record of my sharp thinking and careful planning. The investigator closed her notebook. "Ma'am, you're the most competent client I've interviewed this month." The phone records showed 17 calls to the bank, all made from Caroline's number, all asking about my account status. Attorney Williams spread the printouts across his conference table like a winning poker hand. Each page showed timestamps, phone numbers, and call durations. Caroline had been busy those 3 months, checking on my money with the dedication of a day trader watching stock prices. "Look at this pattern," Thomas said, running his finger down the call log. "Every Tuesday, same time, same questions. She was tracking your Social Security deposits like clockwork." I studied the records, seeing my daughter's desperation laid out in black and white. March 3rd, 10-minute call asking about account balances. March 10th, 8-minute call inquiring about pending deposits. March 17th, the day she forged my signature, a 15-minute call confirming the routing change had processed. She called pretending to be me? Bank Security has recordings of 12 of these calls. Voice analysis confirms it's the same person each time, but the vocal patterns don't match your speech patterns from previous banking calls. Thomas pulled out another folder, this one marked Video Evidence. Inside were dozens of still frames captured from security cameras around Columbus. Caroline at the drive-thru ATM on Spring Street. Caroline inside the Kroger customer service desk. Caroline at the Riverfront Casino, feeding my Social Security money into slot machines. Digital evidence never lies. Subscribe to learn how predators leave electronic tracks they can't erase. The casino footage is particularly damning, Thomas continued. She used cash for everything, but the timestamps match exactly with her ATM withdrawals from your redirected accounts. I picked up one of the casino photos, studying my daughter's face in the grainy security image. She looked happy there, relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in years. My retirement money had bought her those moments of joy while I sat at home wondering why my bills were getting harder to pay. What about the credit card she opened in my name? Declined applications, fortunately. Your credit report shows inquiry attempts, but the signature verification process caught the forgeries before any accounts were approved. Thomas flipped to a new section. However, she did successfully open 2 checking accounts using falsified documents. The bank statements from these phantom accounts told their own story. Deposits matching my stolen Social Security payments, followed immediately by cash withdrawals, money orders, and online gambling transactions. Caroline hadn't even tried to be subtle about spending what she'd stolen. She moved fast once the money hit those accounts, I observed. Most thieves do. They know discovery is inevitable, so they grab what they can before the victim notices. Thomas closed the folder. The prosecutor has enough evidence here for multiple felony charges. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica Chin. ATM camera caught her using your card 3 weeks before you reported it missing. I showed the message to Thomas, who nodded grimly. That's premeditation. She didn't just stumble into stealing from you, she planned it, executed it, and covered her tracks. Or thought she did. What digital evidence would surprise you most in a case like this? Tell me in the comments below. Caroline's systematic approach was becoming clear: phone reconnaissance, document forgery, account manipulation, rapid liquidation. She treated stealing from me like a business plan. Caroline's lawyer called it a family misunderstanding. The prosecutor called it attempted murder and grand theft. The courthouse hallway buzzed with morning activity as I sat on a wooden bench outside courtroom C. 3 months had passed since that dinner in Caroline's kitchen, 3 months of investigations, evidence gathering, and legal maneuvering. Now we were here for what Attorney Williams called the make-or-break hearing. Caroline's defense attorney was a thin man in an expensive suit, the kind lawyers wear when they're trying to convince juries that their clients are victims of circumstance rather than criminals. He'd been making his case to anyone who'd listen: elderly mother, confused about finances, ungrateful daughter trying to help, tragic misunderstanding blown out of proportion. Prosecutor Maria Santos saw things differently. Your client systematically defrauded a 73-year-old woman out of $53,000, she said, her voice echoing in the hallway. She forged documents, opened fraudulent accounts, and when her mother started asking questions, she attempted to incapacitate her with an unknown substance. The defense attorney adjusted his tie nervously. Mrs. Patterson was trying to protect her mother's assets. The dinner incident was an accidental medication mix-up. Accidental? Prosecutor Santos opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. Mr. Morrison, your client had power of attorney documents ready to file the morning after the accident. She had nursing home brochures in her purse. She'd already contacted real estate agents about selling her mother's house. I watched this legal chess match from my bench, Margaret beside me with her own notepad, writing down everything for our records. Caroline sat at the defendant's table, her hands folded, wearing a navy blue dress that made her look younger, more vulnerable. Would you accept a plea deal or demand a full trial? The choice between certainty and justice isn't always clear. Attorney Williams had explained the options to me the night before. Caroline was facing 8 felony charges: elder abuse, financial fraud, identity theft, forgery, attempted assault, and 3 counts of theft by deception. If convicted on all counts, she could spend 15 years in prison. The plea deal on the table was much lighter: 5 years for financial fraud, 3 years for attempted assault, sentences to run concurrently. She'd be out in 4 years with good behavior. What does your client think about the state's offer? Judge Henderson asked from the bench. Caroline's lawyer whispered something in her ear. She shook her head firmly, her jaw set in that stubborn line I remembered from her teenage years. Your Honor, my client maintains her innocence and requests a full jury trial. Prosecutor Santos smiled, the expression of someone who'd been hoping for exactly that answer. The state is ready to proceed, Your Honor. Judge Henderson consulted his calendar, his gavel poised. Trial date set for 60 days from today. Bail remains denied pending trial. Caroline turned to look at me as the bailiff led her away, her eyes holding something I couldn't quite read. Regret, maybe. Or calculation. The gavel came down with a sound like breaking glass. 12 jurors took 4 hours to reach their verdict. Caroline spent every minute watching the clock. The courtroom was packed for closing arguments, more people than I'd expected. Word had gotten around about the case: the daughter who tried to poison her own mother, the elderly woman who fought back with evidence and determination. Local news cameras lined the back wall, their lenses focused on Caroline's table. Prosecutor Santos stood before the jury box, her final presentation organized on cards she barely needed to reference. Ladies and gentlemen, this case isn't complicated. It's about greed, deception, and a daughter who decided her mother's money was worth more than her mother's life. She walked them through the evidence one final time. The forged signatures, the redirected Social Security payments, the power of attorney documents dated for the day after the attempted poisoning. The timeline was damning, each piece of evidence building on the last like steps leading to an inevitable conclusion. When Caroline Patterson realized her mother was getting suspicious, she didn't confess. She didn't apologize. She didn't try to make things right. Prosecutor Santos paused, letting that sink in. She tried to drug her into compliance. Caroline's defense attorney had done his best with an impossible case. He'd argued confusion, good intentions gone wrong, an elderly mother who'd misunderstood her daughter's efforts to help. But the evidence was overwhelming, the pattern too clear to dismiss. Justice delayed isn't always justice denied. Subscribe for stories that prove the system can work when victims refuse to stay silent. The jury had listened carefully during the 5-day trial. I'd testified for 3 hours, walking them through my discovery of the theft, my methodical documentation, my decision to switch the glasses that night. Several jurors had taken notes when I explained how I'd photographed the power of attorney documents while Caroline recovered from her own poison. Margaret testified about the signature analysis, her courthouse experience lending weight to her conclusions. The bank manager explained how the routing changes had been processed, each one requiring phone calls from someone claiming to be me. Jessica Chen presented the APS investigation findings, her professional assessment that this was systematic elder abuse, not family confusion. But it was the video evidence that sealed Caroline's fate. 12 minutes of security footage showing her at ATM machines, customer service desks, and casino gaming floors, spending my money while I sat at home wondering why my budget was getting tighter every month. The jury returned at 4:30 on a Friday afternoon, their faces serious as they filed into the jury box. The foreman, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, stood when Judge Henderson asked for their verdict. On the charge of elder financial abuse, we find the defendant guilty. Caroline's shoulders sagged slightly, but she kept her eyes forward. On the charge of attempted assault with a dangerous substance, we find the defendant guilty. By the time the foreman finished reading all 8 guilty verdicts, Caroline was gripping the edge of the defendant's table, her knuckles white against the dark wood. Judge Henderson scheduled sentencing for the following week, but the outcome was clear. Caroline would be going to prison for a long time. As the bailiff led her away, Caroline turned to look at me one final time. Her expression wasn't anger or regret. It was something closer to surprise, as if she genuinely hadn't believed this moment would come. Is 8 years enough for what she tried to do? Tell me what you think justice looks like in cases like this. The gavel came down on Caroline's freedom, but it opened the door to mine. The restitution check had more zeros than I expected. Justice apparently paid interest. 6 months after Caroline's sentencing, I sat in my kitchen holding a cashier's check for $68,412. My stolen Social Security payments plus the money Caroline had gambled away, plus penalties, plus interest calculated from the date of each theft. The bank manager who'd first helped me identify the fraud sat across from my kitchen table, this time with papers for new accounts, security protocols, and protection measures that would make future theft nearly impossible. We're setting up what's called a fortress banking system, David Martinez explained, sliding forms across my table. Multiple layers of verification for any account changes, mandatory in-person approval for large withdrawals, and automatic alerts for unusual activity. My new checking account came with biometric security, photo ID requirements, and a personal banker assigned specifically to elderly clients. The savings account required 2-person authorization for any changes, plus written notification sent to Attorney Williams for any transaction over $500. What about credit monitoring? I asked, remembering the credit card applications Caroline had submitted in my name. Full protection package, David confirmed. Any attempt to open new credit in your name triggers immediate notification to you, me, and your attorney. Plus quarterly credit reports automatically mailed to your address. How would you protect yourself from the next financial predator? The security measures that work might surprise you. Margaret had helped me research the best protection services, the ones specifically designed for older adults who'd already been victimized. Monthly statements came with large print summaries, unusual activity highlighted in red, and a direct phone line to real humans who knew my case history. But the most important change was mental. I wasn't embarrassed anymore about what Caroline had done, wasn't ashamed that my own daughter had tried to steal my independence. The shame belonged to her, not to me. One more thing, David said, pulling out a final document. We're enrolling you in our elder abuse prevention program. Monthly check-ins, financial counseling if you want it, and a support group for people who've been through similar situations. The support group met every Thursday at the community center, 8 people whose own family members had tried to exploit their trust. We shared stories, compared security measures, and reminded each other that surviving financial abuse made us stronger, not more vulnerable. I'd also started volunteering with Adult Protective Services, helping other elderly victims understand their rights and navigate the legal system. Jessica Chen said I had a talent for explaining complex financial crimes in ways that made sense to people who felt overwhelmed by the legal process. My cedar chest got a new lock, a digital combination system that Margaret had recommended. But it wasn't just about keeping secrets anymore. Now it held evidence of my victory, documentation that fighting back was possible, proof that justice could work when victims refused to stay quiet. What's the most important lesson you take from a story like this? Share your thoughts below. The fortress was built. My independence was restored. Caroline's letters from prison could wait another day to be read. I kept Caroline's letters from prison. Not for forgiveness, for evidence that some lessons take time. The first letter arrived 3 weeks after her sentencing, my name and address written in Caroline's familiar handwriting on the envelope. Inside, 2 pages of justification, explanation, and requests for money for her commissary account. She was sorry I'd misunderstood her intentions. She was sorry the situation had gotten out of hand. She was sorry I'd involved lawyers and prosecutors instead of handling things privately within the family. She wasn't sorry for stealing from me. She wasn't sorry for trying to drug me. She wasn't sorry for planning to lock me away in a nursing home while she liquidated my life savings. I filed that first letter in my cedar chest under evidence, post-conviction. Attorney Williams had said it might be useful if Caroline ever applied for early parole. The letters kept coming, one every few weeks, each one slightly different in tone. By month 6, the justifications gave way to bargaining. Caroline promised to pay back every penny if I'd just write a letter to the parole board supporting her early release. She'd learned her lesson. She'd found God in prison. She'd never make the same mistakes again. If this story opened your eyes to elder abuse warning signs, subscribe. Share it with someone who needs to see what fighting back looks like. Your voice might save a life. I started leading the support group at the community center after Helen, our original facilitator, moved to Florida to live with her sister. Every Thursday at 2 o'clock, 6 or 8 people gathered around folding tables to share their stories of financial exploitation by family members. There was Robert, whose son had stolen his disability payments for 2 years. Maria, whose daughter-in-law had taken over her bank accounts after her husband died. Frank, whose grandson had forged his signature on a reverse mortgage application. Each story was different, but the patterns were always the same. Gradual isolation, increasing control over finances, exploitation of trust and family loyalty, followed by escalation when the victims started asking questions. The hardest part isn't the money, Maria said during one meeting. It's accepting that someone you loved and raised could see you as nothing but a source of cash. But we'd all learned the same lesson: fighting back was possible. Documentation worked. The legal system responded when victims refused to stay quiet. Family loyalty didn't require financial martyrdom. By her second year in prison, Caroline's letters had changed again. Less bargaining, more reflection. She was taking classes, she wrote. Business ethics and financial responsibility. She was beginning to understand how her actions had affected me, how close she'd come to destroying not just my savings but my independence. Those letters went into the cedar chest too, but in a different folder. Potential reconciliation, future review. The cedar chest that had once been my evidence vault had become something different. A reminder that careful preparation could defeat even family betrayal. That quiet strength could overcome calculated deception. That sometimes the people who underestimate you the most give you the greatest opportunity to prove them wrong. What's the most important lesson you'll take from my story? How will you protect yourself and the people you love from financial predators who count on silence and shame? The next glass someone offers me gets the closest inspection. Trust, I learned, requires verification. But I'm not afraid anymore. Fear belongs to the people who have something to hide.